2 weeks ago, we examined 1 John chapter 2, verses 7 through 11. We learned that love should be central to the Christian's life. John reminded us that 2 Old Testament commandments are embodied as a new commandment. Jesus' proclamation that all the commandments hang on these 2 commandments stresses their importance. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Furthermore, there are new commandments, a new commandment in the sense that they have been demonstrated in the life of Jesus Christ. And also they're demonstrated in the lives of believers who seek to follow Jesus' example. John proposes that we either love or we either hate people. There's no middle ground. We must not disregard those that we come in contact with on a daily basis. Rather, we should respond with them with love and kindness. Today we'll study verses 15 through 17. And let's begin by reading verse 15. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in him. To begin with, we must ask ourselves, are we to hate the physical world? Are we to hate the trees? Are we to hate the rivers, the mountains, the beach? Are we to hate the lakes and the oceans? Are we to hate wildlife? If that were the case, then what do we do with Romans chapter 1, where Paul tells us, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that the people are without excuse. Or what about Genesis 1? God saw that all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day. Clearly, John is not referring to the physical earth. Rather, he is speaking of the world in a moral sense. He's speaking of a world apart from God. It means that the world has not. It means the world that has forsaken the God who made it. It's the elements in the world's culture that are diametrically opposed to God and to his will. To love the world, to love those things that God hates, to show that in fact that you truly do not love God. For if we truly love God, then we will love the things of God. We will strive to live our life so that it is pleasing to God and what he desires for us. Paul also cautioned us about loving the world in his letter to the Romans. He said, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve God's will, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Do you want to be in God's will? Do you want to demonstrate that you love him? Then you must not love the ways of this world. You must not conform to the ways of this world. Rather, we are to transform our mind. We are to change our thinking. We are to change the way we see the world, the way we see reality. We must see it through the lens of the Bible. We must foster a Christian worldview. This will give us the framework we need to better understand how we are to live in this fallen world. Let's continue reading verse 16. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life seeks to draw us into sin, away from God. Exactly what are these 3? Let's first consider lust of the flesh. Usually when we think of lust of the flesh, we think of it's referring to sexual sin. And it does include that, but it actually is much more than that. Barclay gives a good explanation of its more inclusive meaning. Let's read his quote. It includes the sins of the flesh, but also worldly ambition and selfish aims. To be subject to the flesh's desire is to judge everything in this world by purely material standards. It is to live a life dominated by the senses. It's to be gluttonous in food, slavish in pleasure, lustful and lack in morals, selfish in the use of possessions, disregarding all spiritual values, extravagant of material desires. The flesh's desire pays no attention to the commandments of God, the judgment of God, the standards of God, and the very existence of God. Next, John mentions the lust of the eyes. We see this spelled out in the 10 commandments that were given to Moses. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. The lust of the eyes is the spirit of seeing something and desiring it, and once you have it, to flaunt it. It's the spirit of thinking that accumulating material things can bring you happiness. The lust of the eyes only values the material. Just look at the world's definition of success. How much money do you have? What type of car do you drive? What neighborhood do you live in? How big is your house? How many toys do you have? All these are the standards that the world measures success. However, that is not how God measures success. The lust of the eyes only values material things. And finally, John mentions the pride of life. This is the person who's a braggart. Look at all that I have. Look at how smart I am. Look at what I have done. Look at my social standing. Look how famous I am. Look at what I have accomplished. This person is all about putting on appearances so as to impress. He wants others to see him favorably. He's overly concerned with other people's opinion of him. His conversation is always a boasting about his self-worth. I have 2 acquaintances, both who have now passed away, but they often bragged about the great things they had done in battle. I have no way of knowing if they were telling the truth or not. They may have been, but my experience is that those who truly have seen battle are hesitant to speak of their experiences. It is something they would much rather forget. Regardless, these 2 wanted to build themselves up by trying to impress others. They suffered from what John referred to as the pride of life. We need to remember the promise found in Proverbs 29, verse 23. Pride brings a person low, but the lowly in spirit gain honor. There's no benefit in being arrogant, being prideful, being a braggart. In the end, it only brings disappointment. On the other hand, the one who is humble will be exalted. Let's finish up and read verse 17. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. The world is passing away. How many foolish men and women have sought after the things that this world only to lose them? The pharaohs of ancient Egypt were buried with their treasures in their pyramids, hoping to have access to them in the afterlife. Instead, in the end, they were only useful for grave robbers and archaeologists. How about the contrast between Lot and Abraham? Given the choice of where to take their separate flocks, Lot chose the green fields near Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot became wealthy and settled in the wicked city of Sodom. After a while, he was sitting in the gates of the city as one of Sodom's civic leaders. He had worldly status, influence, wealth, and comfort. Yet it was all taken away in a moment when the judgment of God came upon Sodom and Gomorrah. He had sought after all the things of this world only to lose them. The parable of the rich fool also speaks of someone who was chasing after the world. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God." How about you? Are you like the rich fool chasing after the things of this world? Are you conforming to the standards of this world? Are you giving in to the lust of the flesh? Are you seeking to satisfy your fleshly desires? Are you giving in to the lust of the eyes? Do you covet things that you don't have? Are you struggling with the pride of life? Are you prideful, bragging about who you are, what you have, what you've done? These are not from the Father. These are not of God. People who are drawn to these vices end up only being disappointed. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life only promise temporary satisfaction, and sometimes there is some satisfaction. However, that satisfaction is short-lived, but the man who has put God at the center of his life has chosen the things that last forever. He has chosen the narrow path. The man who has chosen the wide path, the path that of the world, is doomed for an eternity of disappointment. One day all they have will be taken away from them. But the man or woman of God will be blessed with an eternity of joy and happiness. What path are you on? Are you on the wide path that leads to destruction? Or are you on the narrow path that leads to eternal life?